Sometimes life teaches us lessons in the most unexpected ways. I never planned to pretend or play a role. It just happened out of a deep curiosity, maybe even a little heartbreak. When my son got married, I was overjoyed. Every mother dreams of seeing her child start a new life, to see him happy, to know he's in good hands. I wanted to welcome my daughter-in-law with an open heart. I really did. But somewhere deep down, I wondered, did she really care for my son, for our family? Or was it all just for show? People say you never truly know someone until you live under the same roof. And that thought stayed with me. So when she moved in, I decided not to show her everything about who I am. I kept things simple. I dressed plainly, spoke softly, and never mentioned anything about what I owned, what I knew, or what I had done for my family all those years. I acted like just a simple mother, quiet, humble, and maybe even a little naive. I wanted to see how she would treat me if she thought I was just another ordinary woman, not someone she needed to impress. At first it felt strange. I'd spent my whole life working hard, raising my children, and earning respect, and suddenly I was pretending to be someone who didn't know much about anything. But as days went by, I started noticing little things, how she looked at me when I asked for help in the kitchen, how her tone changed when others weren't around, how she smiled when my son was home but sighed when he left for work. Those moments told me more than words ever could. I remember one afternoon she was on the phone with a friend. She didn't know I was nearby. Her voice was full of pride as she said, "Oh, my mother-in-law. She's sweet but kind of clueless. Doesn't really know how things work these days." I stood there quietly, holding a tray of tea, pretending I hadn't heard a thing. Inside, my heart sank. I wasn't angry, not yet, but I felt a deep sadness, not for myself but for her, because she couldn't see the value in kindness, in humility, and respect for someone older. Still, I kept my role going. I smiled, cooked her favorite meals, and asked about her day as if nothing had happened. You'd be surprised how much people reveal when they think you're harmless. I watched her attitude shift depending on who was watching. When my son was home, she was affectionate, polite, the perfect daughter-in-law. But when it was just the two of us, her mask slipped. She would roll her eyes, make comments under her breath, and sometimes even mock my ways. Yet as I continued this little act of mine, I began to learn something about myself too: patience, restraint, the quiet power of observation. I realized that by staying calm and composed, I could see the truth clearly, without arguments, without drama, without anyone pointing fingers. I wasn't trying to expose her or make her look bad. I simply wanted to understand the kind of person she truly was when no one was watching. And maybe, deep down, I hoped I was wrong. I hoped that behind the pride and impatience, there was a heart that would eventually soften, that she'd come to see me not as competition or burden, but as a mother who only wanted peace in her family. But as time went on, the difference between how she acted and who she really was became impossible to ignore. Sometimes, pretending to be simple isn't about playing a trick. It's about seeing beyond the surface, about finding the truth that polite smiles often hide. And that truth, as I was about to discover, would shake me more deeply than I ever imagined. First impressions can be tricky, can't they? Sometimes people show you exactly who they are, and sometimes they wear a smile that hides everything underneath. When my daughter-in-law first came into our home, she was all grace and charm. She had that soft, polite tone, always smiling, always offering to help. I remember thinking to myself, maybe I was wrong to doubt her. She seemed perfect. Respectful, caring, the kind of woman any mother would be proud to welcome into her family. But it didn't take long before I realized that the way someone behaves when everyone's watching isn't always who they truly are when the lights go off. I started to notice the small things, and it's always the small things that tell the real story. When guests were around, she'd insist on serving tea, making sure everyone noticed how helpful she was. But the moment they left, her smile would fade, and she'd sigh like she had just carried the world on her shoulders. I remember once I gently asked her if she could hand me a glass of water. She looked right at me, paused for a moment, and said, "You could have asked the maid." It wasn't what she said that hurt, it was how she said it, as if my presence in that house was something she just had to tolerate. At that moment, I told myself, stay calm. Don't react. I smiled, thanked her anyway, and walked away. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than any words ever could. I wasn't angry, I was observing. I wanted to see if that was just a moment of frustration or if it revealed something deeper. And as the days went by, I began to see patterns. She was always quick to show kindness when it benefited her, when my son was around, when friends visited, when she wanted to impress someone. But when it was just us, she barely acknowledged me. There were moments when I'd sit in the living room quietly, folding laundry or peeling vegetables, and she'd walk past without even a glance. Yet, if the doorbell rang and someone came in, she'd rush over, suddenly cheerful, calling me Mom in the sweetest voice imaginable. That shift, that sudden change, it said everything. It told me that her kindness was not from the heart. It was a performance, one carefully rehearsed for an audience. But what surprised me most wasn't her behavior. It was how clear everything became once I started paying attention. You see, when you strip away the noise, the chatter, the smiles and gestures meant for show, you begin to see the truth in people's eyes, in their tone, in their smallest reactions. And I realized she wasn't unkind because she hated me. No, she was unkind because she didn't yet understand respect, the kind that comes from within, not from obligation. There were times when I wanted to speak up to tell my son what I'd seen, but something in me stopped. I thought, no, let her reveal herself. Truth has a way of surfacing all on its own. So I stayed quiet, letting each interaction show me who she truly was. There's a saying, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I had to learn that lesson the hard way. And yet, even in those moments of disappointment, I kept reminding myself that every person acts from what they know. Maybe she had never been taught to value the quiet sacrifices mothers make. Maybe she didn't know that the woman she dismissed had once worked day and night to raise the man she now called her husband. Maybe she hadn't yet learned that true character shows when no one's watching. So I continued to play my part, the simple, gentle mother who didn't see much, didn't say much, but noticed everything. And the more I observed, the more the truth unfolded before me, piece by piece, expression by expression, until it became impossible to pretend that I hadn't seen who she really was. There's a quiet kind of power in observation, a strength that doesn't come from speaking but from simply watching. When you stop trying to prove yourself and just listen, you start to hear everything that words can't say. That's what I began to realize during those early weeks of living with my daughter-in-law. I had already chosen to appear simple, to stay in the background, and that role gave me something I hadn't expected, the gift of truly seeing people for who they are. Most days I would sit in the corner of the living room, folding clothes or chopping vegetables while she moved around the house. I became invisible in my own home, and as strange as that sounds, it allowed me to see clearly. People tend to drop their masks when they believe no one important is watching. They speak differently, act differently, even breathe differently. And in that quiet space, I noticed things that I would have missed if I had been talking, reacting, or trying to correct her. There were mornings when I'd wake up early, make breakfast, and she'd walk into the kitchen still half asleep. I'd greet her warmly, offer her tea, and sometimes she'd respond politely, but other times she'd just nod without looking up from her phone. I watched the rhythm of her moods, how her voice changed depending on whether she was talking to me or to someone else. When she spoke to her friends, her laughter filled the room, light and carefree. But with me, it was different. Short answers, clipped tones, and eyes that never really met mine. It wasn't hatred. It was something subtler, a quiet disregard, like I was part of the furniture. I remember one afternoon vividly. I had made her favorite dish, thinking it might make her smile. She tasted it, said it's fine, and pushed the plate aside. A few hours later, my son came home and suddenly she was full of praise. "Oh, Mom made my favorite meal today," she told him with a bright smile, serving him like the perfect wife. I just sat there quietly, stirring my tea, pretending not to notice. But inside, I was learning. I was learning how people can switch their faces so quickly, how kindness can be a performance when it's not rooted in the heart. But here's the thing, the more I observed her, the more I started to see beyond the behavior. I began to understand her fears too. She was young, maybe insecure, trying to prove herself in a new home, surrounded by expectations she didn't fully understand. Her attitude wasn't always arrogance. Sometimes it was confusion, frustration, maybe even loneliness. Observation, I realized, isn't just about seeing what's wrong in someone else. It's about seeing the full picture, the flaws, the pain, the reasons behind the walls people build. So I watched, not with judgment, but with curiosity and patience. I paid attention to what made her snap, what softened her, what moments brought out her real smile, the unguarded one that appeared only when she forgot to pretend. Those little glimpses showed me that there was still goodness inside her, buried under pride and misunderstanding. And maybe that's why I kept my silence. Because sometimes, when you truly see someone, you realize they're not cruel, just lost in their own world of fears and habits. In that stillness, I learned more than I ever could have through arguments or lectures. Observation became my teacher, and through it, I found both clarity and compassion. It's in those quiet moments, when you stop talking and start noticing, that truth begins to unfold, slowly, gently, and undeniably. There's always that one moment when everything becomes clear, when the small things you've been noticing start to form a picture you can't unsee. For me, that moment came quietly, without warning, in a way that left me both stunned and heartbroken. I had spent weeks keeping my distance, staying quiet, pretending to be that simple mother who didn't see much. But the truth has a way of revealing itself, and when it did, it struck me harder than I ever expected. It happened one afternoon when my son was away at work. The house was calm, sunlight spilling through the curtains, and I was sitting in the living room, sewing a loose button on one of his shirts. My daughter-in-law was in her room talking on the phone. I wasn't trying to listen. I've never been the kind of person who likes to pry, but her voice was sharp and loud, carrying clearly through the hallway. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then I heard her say my name, followed by a small laugh. My heart tightened. She said, she just sits there all day doing nothing. My poor husband has to take care of everything. She's sweet, but so old-fashioned, so clueless. I have to teach her everything. Then came laughter from the other end of the call, laughter that seemed to echo through my chest. I sat there frozen, the needle in my hand trembling. I felt the sting of her words sink deep, not because of the insult itself, but because it came from someone I had opened my heart to, someone I had prayed for, someone I wanted to see as my own daughter. In that moment, I realized all those small things I had brushed off, the eye rolls, the cold replies, the half-hearted gestures, weren't just random moods. They were glimpses of how she truly saw me. I wasn't a mother to her. I was an inconvenience she had to tolerate. I didn't say a word. I didn't walk into her room or confront her. I simply sat there staring at the thread in my hand, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely invisible. That's the kind of pain words can't describe, when you're in your own home, surrounded by people you love, yet you feel like you don't belong. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed up cooking her favorite dishes, all the mornings I'd greeted her with a smile, even when she barely looked at me. And now I knew she never saw those gestures for what they were. To her, I was just an outdated woman trying too hard to be part of her world. But as the pain settled, something else began to take its place, a strange kind of calm. I realized that hearing those words, as hurtful as they were, was a gift in disguise, because now I knew the truth, and the truth is always better than a lie dressed as kindness. I didn't need to wonder anymore who she really was. I had seen it, I had heard it, and no amount of polite smiles could erase that moment. That day, when my son came home, I greeted them both as I always did. I served dinner, listened to their stories, and said nothing. She laughed as if nothing had happened, unaware that I now saw her completely differently. I didn't expose her. I didn't complain. I didn't seek revenge. I just watched her calmly, quietly, knowing that she had already revealed everything I needed to know. Sometimes the truth doesn't come through confrontation or shouting. It comes in silence, through a single careless moment when someone forgets to pretend. And once you've seen it, you can never go back to not knowing. After that moment, something inside me shifted. I stopped trying to figure her out, stopped wondering why she said what she said. Instead, I started reflecting on what this whole experience was teaching me. Life has a strange way of showing you truths when you least expect them. Sometimes it does it through happiness, sometimes through pain. For me, it came through silence, observation, and disappointment. But even in that hurt, there was a lesson, one I wouldn't have learned any other way. I realized that people don't always treat you according to who you are. They treat you based on what they see or what they think you are worth. My daughter-in-law saw a simple, quiet woman and assumed that meant I was weak, uninformed, maybe even beneath her. But what she didn't know was that there is a strength that comes with years, a wisdom that doesn't need to shout to be real. Pretending to be simple taught me just how blind people can be when they judge others by appearances. I began to see how quick people are to value what is shiny and new while overlooking the ones who built the foundation they now stand on. It's so easy for the younger generation to think they know more, to forget the struggles that shape the hands that now serve them, and maybe in some ways that's just life. Every generation learns these truths too late, but as a mother, it still hurts when you see someone disrespecting what you hold sacred: kindness, gratitude, family. I learned that silence is not weakness, it's power, the kind of power that keeps you grounded when others lose their way. I could have reacted that day when I overheard her words. I could have shouted, cried, or told my son everything. But what would that have done? Maybe it would have created chaos. Maybe it would have forced apologies that meant nothing. Instead, I chose peace, not for her, but for myself. I decided I didn't want anger to take away the calm I had earned through years of experience. Another thing I learned was that respect cannot be demanded or bought. It has to come naturally from understanding someone's worth. You can't force someone to love you or treat you right, but you can control how you respond. And sometimes the best response is to step back, let them reveal who they are, and trust that time will do the rest. Time has a way of showing people the truth they tried to hide and the hearts they took for granted. It also made me think about my own past, how I might have judged others without truly knowing their struggles. Maybe this was life's way of showing me the other side, of teaching me empathy in a deeper way. Because once you've been misunderstood or underestimated, you start seeing others differently too. You stop assuming, you start listening, you start recognizing pain where others only see pride. And maybe that was the greatest lesson of all, that everyone, no matter how flawed or cruel they seem, is fighting something inside. That doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it helps you find peace in forgiving it. Because forgiveness isn't about saying it's okay, it's about freeing yourself from the weight of bitterness. So yes, pretending to be simple opened my eyes, but it also opened my heart. I learned that truth doesn't always need to be spoken loudly to be understood, and that sometimes the quietest experiences carry the loudest lessons. And once you truly learn from pain, it never comes back as pain again. It comes back as wisdom. In the days that followed, I carried a strange mix of emotions inside me: sadness, calm, and an unexpected kind of strength. I had seen her truth, felt the sting of her words, and accepted what I could not change. But I also began to look beyond the hurt and ask myself what I wanted to do with it. I could hold on to resentment, keep my distance, and let the bitterness grow. Or I could take a step towards something better, not for her sake, but for mine. Forgiveness doesn't come easily, especially when it's undeserved. It's not about forgetting or pretending nothing happened. It's about choosing not to let that pain define you. And that's what I decided to do. I didn't confront her or demand an apology. I simply chose peace. I told myself that one day she might understand, and even if she didn't, that would be her lesson to learn, not mine. I had already learned mine. Over time, I started noticing little shifts. Maybe it was the calm in my voice or the way I treated her the same, even after everything. She began to soften just a little. Her tone changed, her expressions became less sharp, and once in a while she even looked at me with what seemed like real warmth. It wasn't much, but it was something. I could see that she was confused, maybe even guilty, and that was okay. Growth takes time. I wasn't looking for her to become the perfect daughter-in-law. I just wanted peace in my home and peace in my heart. One evening, my son came home late from work, tired and quiet. I had kept dinner ready for him, and she brought it to the table. As we all sat together, I noticed how she placed the food carefully, making sure everything was in order. It wasn't about the act itself, it was the look in her eyes, softer than before, almost like she was trying to start over without saying the words. That small act spoke louder than any apology could. Sometimes change doesn't come with big gestures or confessions. It comes through silence, effort, and time. And I also realized something else. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciling with someone completely. It means releasing yourself from the chains of anger so that your heart has space to breathe again. I started focusing more on gratitude for my son, for my home, and even for this lesson. Because without it, I might never have discovered how strong I really was. There were still days when her attitude slipped, moments when she spoke sharply or rolled her eyes, but they no longer hurt the way they once did. I had reached a place where her words couldn't shake me anymore. I had learned that peace isn't given, it's created from within, and once you find it, no one can take it away. In time, I began to see her differently, not as the person who had hurt me, but as someone still learning how to love, how to respect, how to understand. We all have our seasons of growth, and maybe she was still in hers. I chose to be patient, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. And that choice, that quiet decision to love without expecting anything back, changed everything. Looking back now, I realize that pretending to be a simple mother was never about deceiving anyone. It was about discovering truth, patience, and grace. It showed me that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through forgiveness and understanding. And in the end, the greatest victory wasn't proving her wrong. It was finding peace within myself.